She was not merely rejected. She was condemned, her and the child growing inside her, by the very Alpha King who had whispered promises under the northern lights. Pregnant and alone, she was found collapsed in the snow by another king. And when the biological father saw her months later, standing beside a different Alpha with her belly round with life, the possessive fury that tore through him came 7 months too late. Morella never imagined that the winter solstice festival would be the night that changed everything. The celebration was always like this. Hundreds of wolves from every pack in the northern territories gathered under the Aurora's dance, celebrating the longest night, forging alliances, honouring ancient traditions beneath ice sculptures that caught and refracted the ethereal lights above. For the Alphas and their courts, it was an opportunity to display power and strengthen political bonds. The Whispering Pines pack did not come seeking glory. They came because the festival was sacred, and even modest packs honoured the old ways. Morella moved through the celebration with quiet grace, wearing a simple dress of forest green. Well-made but unremarkable, her healer's satchel never far from her side. She belonged to the background of such gatherings, tending to minor injuries, offering remedies for too much wine, making herself useful in the ways healers always did. She kept her focus on her work, her long dark curls occasionally falling forward to frame her warm brown eyes. Eyes that had seen suffering and learned compassion, hands that had mended wounds and eased pain, a heart that still believed, despite everything she'd witnessed, that people were fundamentally good. She had learned early on that healers were valued but rarely truly seen. But then it happened. It was as if the northern lights themselves had reached down and wrapped around her chest. Morella gasped, her hand flying to her heart as an overwhelming presence flooded her awareness. It was not her wolf stirring. It was something far more primal, more human, more dangerous. Attraction. The word whispered through every fibre of her being, undeniable and intoxicating. Morella lifted her head sharply, her eyes searching through the crowd of swirling cloaks and glittering ice, following that magnetic pull that drew her with irresistible force toward the raised platform where the visiting royalty stood. And then she saw him. Kael'thor, Alpha King of the Iron Frost Kingdom, stood in conversation with visiting dignitaries, but his dark eyes had already found her. He was imposing, broad-shouldered and commanding in black and silver formal wear, dark hair catching the ethereal light, an intensity in his gaze that made the air between them feel charged with electricity. He was in the middle of a sentence when their eyes met. The words died on his lips. His entire body went still, every muscle focused with predatory attention on the healer in the simple green dress who stood frozen in the crowd below. It was not subtle. It was not gentle. It was like being caught in an avalanche that started in his chest and spread through every thought, every instinct, every damned rational defense he'd built around his carefully controlled life. And in that moment, with ice sculptures glittering around them and the northern lights painting the sky in shades of green and violet, neither of them could have known that this connection would create a life, or that in 7 weeks he would demand that life be destroyed. But first, there was the night, and the promises, and the lies that felt like truth under a sky full of impossible light. 7 weeks ago, under the dancing northern lights of the winter solstice festival, Morella had believed in destiny. She remembered the exact moment Kael'thor had crossed the celebration grounds toward her, how the crowd had parted automatically before the Alpha King of the Iron Frost Kingdom, how his dark eyes had never left her face. He was imposing in his black and silver formal wear, every inch the powerful ruler. Yet, when he'd stopped before her, his voice had been surprisingly gentle. "I've been watching you all evening," he'd said. "The way you move through the crowd, helping, healing, never asking for anything in return. You're different." The conversation had flowed like the lights above them, effortless, Intoxicating, he'd drawn her away from the crowds, and beneath the aurora's ethereal glow, they'd talked for hours. About healing and leadership, about loneliness and duty, about the weight of others' expectations. When he'd kissed her, it felt like the northern lights themselves had ignited in her veins. Later, in the privacy of his chambers, he'd held her face between his hands and whispered, "You're different from anyone I've ever met. The moon doesn't bring people together by accident, Mirella. This meant something." She'd believed him, believed every whispered promise, every tender touch, every word that made her feel seen for the first time in her life. Morning had come too soon. He'd pressed a kiss to her forehead, his dark eyes warm with something that looked like regret. "I'll never forget this night. Or you. The moon brought us together." Then he was gone, and she'd returned to her modest life with a heart full of hope and memories that felt like magic. Now, 7 weeks later, Mirella stood in her small healer's cottage with trembling hands pressed against her belly. The test was positive. The life growing inside her was undeniable, precious, terrifying. Fear warred with joy, but beneath both was a deeper certainty. Caelthor deserved to know. He'd been genuine that night. She was sure of it. Whatever had kept him from seeking her out, he would want to know about their child. The journey to the Iron Frost Fortress took 2 days. Mirella kept one hand protectively over her barely showing belly the entire way, whispering reassurances to the tiny life within. "Your father will be happy," she told the child. "He has to be." She had no idea how catastrophically wrong she was. The guards at the Iron Frost Fortress gates looked at Mirella with barely concealed contempt. "The king doesn't see commoners without appointment. Please," she'd begged, hand protectively over her belly. "Tell him Mirella is here. From the Winter Solstice Festival. He'll remember." The sneering whispers started the moment she was led inside. Servants turned away, guards exchanged knowing looks. The hostile corridors seemed to close in around her with each step, but she held on to hope. Once she saw Caelthor, once they were alone, everything would be fine. The throne room doors opened, and that hope shattered instantly. Caelthor sat on his throne in formal regalia, but he wasn't alone. Beside him stood a woman of cold, crystalline beauty, platinum blonde hair perfectly arranged, icy blue eyes assessing Mirella with immediate disdain, expensive jewels glittering at her throat. Her hand rested possessively on the arm of Caelthor's throne. The chamber was packed, nobles in fine silks, stern-faced council members, guards lining the walls. This wasn't private. This wasn't the reunion she'd imagined. Caelthor's face was a stranger's, cold, formal, utterly unrecognizing. "Your Majesty," Mirella began, her voice trembling. We need to speak. About the festival, about—" Her hand moved to her belly. "I'm carrying your child." The throne room exploded. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The blonde woman's face twisted with fury. "You said you barely knew her," she shrieked. "Now this peasant claims to carry your bastard." Caelthor's expression shifted from cold indifference to something far worse, rage and disgust. He rose from his throne, towering and terrible. "I remember nothing of you," he said, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "But the northern lights, you said the moon brought us." "I said nothing." His words were brutal, final. "You're delusional. A desperate Omega trying to trap a king with lies and witchcraft." Council members erupted. "Dark magic. Seduction plot. Political trap." Mirella's world tilted. "No, please, you remember, that thing inside you is not mine," Caelthor snarled. "It's a bastard that threatens my legitimate bloodline." He stepped closer, and Mirella saw nothing of the tender man from that night, only cold calculation and fury. "That bastard inside you will never bear my name. End this pregnancy, now, or my healers will do it for you." "No!" Mirella screamed as guards seized her arms. "It's your child, our child!" They dragged her backward, her protests echoing uselessly off stone walls. The last thing she saw before the door slammed shut was Kael'thor turning away, the blonde woman's satisfied smirk, and the complete destruction of everything she'd believed. Outside, snow had begun to fall. Inside, something far more precious had already frozen and died. The guards threw Morella out into the gathering storm without ceremony. Heavy snow was already falling, the wind beginning its deadly howl. She stood trembling in the courtyard, hand pressed protectively over her belly. Return home and risk being found, forced to comply with Kael'thor's demands? Hide somewhere and be hunted down as a fugitive accused of witchcraft? No, neither option ended with her child alive. The choice crystallized with brutal clarity. Flee into the wilderness. Possible death, but freedom. Her baby's life would end in her arms, not on some healer's table while Kael'thor's guards held her down. The shift to wolf form came hard. Pregnancy made her body resist, every bone protesting the transformation. But finally her dark fur emerged, and she ran. The blizzard intensified with terrifying speed. Visibility dropped to nothing, snow driving into her face, cold penetrating even her thick winter coat. Her wolf body struggled through deepening drifts, exhaustion setting in far too quickly. "I'm so sorry," she whispered to the life inside her, the words forming in her mind even in wolf form. "I thought he'd love you. I thought we'd be safe." Her legs gave out. She couldn't maintain the shift, her body forced back to human form, leaving her naked and vulnerable in the killing cold. She crawled forward on hands and knees before collapsing into a deep drift. The hypothermia came fast. Morella curled around her belly, trying desperately to keep her baby warm, even as ice formed in her hair. "I won't let him kill you," she whispered through frozen lips. "Even if we die out here in the cold, at least we die free. At least I protected you." Consciousness faded like snow melting. Her final prayer drifted up to the howling sky. "Moon goddess, I don't ask for myself. But my baby, they're innocent. Please let them live. Send someone. Anyone." Darkness swallowed her whole, and her last thought was almost peaceful. "At least we're together. At least I didn't kill you." The snow continued to fall, burying mother and child beneath white silence. Theron hadn't slept. Something pulled at him all night, an instinct he'd learned long ago never to ignore. At dawn, he was already mounted and riding toward his territory's southern border. The storm had passed, leaving the world buried in pristine white. Beautiful, deadly. His wolf stirred urgently. Danger. Someone needs help. He followed the intuition through the snow-laden forest until he saw it, a small form half buried in a drift, long dark hair spread like a shadow against the white. Theron was off his horse and digging frantically before conscious thought caught up. His hands found frozen skin, a delicate face, and, "By the moon," he breathed, "she's pregnant." The curve of her belly was unmistakable even through her thin clothing. Both of them were barely alive, lips blue, skin like ice. Theron gathered her with infinite care, cradling her against his chest to share his warmth, one arm supporting her belly protectively. He ran, faster than he'd ever run, his blue cloak streaming behind him, shouting for healers before he even reached the fortress gates. "Severe hypothermia," the head healer said grimly, working quickly. "She's 7 weeks pregnant. We might lose the baby, or both of them." "You don't lose either." Theron's voice was steel. "Whatever it takes, save them both." The next 3 days were an agony of waiting. Theron visited constantly, watching the rise and fall of her chest, the healer's careful monitoring of the tiny heartbeat within her. On the 3rd day, her eyes opened, warm brown and full of confusion and fear. "You're safe," Theron said gently, his golden hair catching the firelight. "Both of you are safe." Her hand flew to her belly. "My baby." Alive, strong heartbeat. The healer says, "You're both going to be fine." The sob that tore from her was equal parts relief and devastation. The story poured out through tears. The festival, the promises, the throne room, the demand to end her pregnancy, the blizzard. Theron's jaw tightened with each revelation, his warm blue eyes growing cold with fury. He's a monster. What he did was unforgivable. I have nowhere to go, she whispered. If I return home, they'll find me, make me. Stay here, Theron interrupted firmly. As long as you need, I'll protect you both. Why? Morella's voice broke. You don't even know me. Theron met her eyes with absolute sincerity. Because it's right. Because you're carrying a child who deserves protection. Because no one should face what you've faced alone. He leaned forward slightly, and his voice carried the weight of an oath. You're safe here. Both of you are safe. And anyone who tries to hurt either of you will have to go through me first. For the first time in days, Morella felt something fragile unfurl in her chest. Hope. The transformation happened slowly, like winter melting into spring. Month 2 brought physical recovery and cautious trust. Theron maintained respectful distance but never disappeared, always present in the halls, joining her for meals, asking careful questions that helped them learn each other. Morella began wearing flowing dresses in deep greens and blues that he'd had made for her, and the haunted look gradually left her eyes. Month 3 changed everything. At the healer's appointment, Theron appeared in the doorway, hesitant. May I come, if it's not too intrusive? When the heartbeat filled the room, strong, steady, impossibly fast, they both cried. Theron stared at Morella's barely showing belly with wonder. That's your baby. They're real. They're alive. Month 4 brought the first kick during dinner. Morella gasped, hand flying to her noticeably rounded belly. Are you all right? Theron was instantly alert. The baby, they kicked! Wonder flooded her face. May I? His large hand hovered uncertainly. She guided it to the spot, and when the flutter came again, tears tracked down his golden beard. Hello, little one. I've been waiting to meet you. Month 5 found them painting the nursery together. Soft yellow walls, a hand-carved cradle Theron made himself. Late nights when the baby grew active, he'd read old northern tales, his deep voice making the child kick in response. Traditional songs followed, and with them, growing closeness. Hands held, protective arms, touches that lingered. One evening, surrounded by half-finished nursery preparations, Theron took her hands. Morella, may I be this child's father? Not just in secret, but officially. My heir, my family. You already are, she whispered through tears. In every way that matters. When they're born, they'll bear my name, inherit my kingdom. He cupped her face gently. I didn't give this child life, Morella, but I'll give them everything else. Love, protection, a father who chose them before they were even born. Their first kiss was tender, careful, asking permission with every breath. And in that moment, something more than romantic love bloomed. A family being built by choice, not fate. Complete security finally, after so much fear. 6 months after casting Morella into the blizzard, Kael'thor assumed she was dead. The messenger who arrived at the Iron Frost Kingdom shattered that assumption. She's alive, Your Majesty. The healer woman, Morella. She's in the northern reaches, 6 months pregnant, under the protection of Alpha King Theron. The council chamber erupted. Kael'thor went deadly still, then began pacing like a caged animal, dark intensity twisting into something far uglier. Lady Seraphine's icy composure cracked. You said she was lying about being pregnant. Her platinum hair whipped as she turned on him. You said she used dark magic, that it wasn't real. I never believed. Kael'thor's defense sounded hollow even to his own ears. She must have... Enough. The head counselor's voice cut through the chaos. That child is your legitimate heir, Your Majesty. They have legal claim to your throne. Another counselor leaned forward urgently. Theron could use your bloodline against us politically. This is a direct threat to the kingdom's stability. The pressure mounted from all sides. Other pacts sent urgent messages demanding Kael'thor claim his heir. Political allies questioned his judgment. Lady Seraphine's family threatened to break the betrothal if the scandal continued. Caelthor's internal war was visible in every tense line of his body. He didn't want Morella. That hadn't changed. He didn't want the responsibility of fatherhood, the inconvenience, the complications. But the thought of another king raising his child, his bloodline, his heir, that ignited something primal and possessive that he couldn't control. "That child carries my blood," he snarled, slamming his fist on the table. "My lineage. I don't care about the woman, but no bastard of mine will be raised by a rival king. That heir belongs to me." The decision crystallized. He would reclaim the child, only the child. Frame it as duty, as political necessity. Within the hour, formal demands were sent to Theron. Return my legitimate heir immediately. Legal claims were filed with the Wolf Council invoking biological father's rights. And a final threat, barely veiled: return the child or face the consequences. The war for Morella's baby had begun. The letter arrived in Morella's 7th month, delivered by official Wolf Council courier. Theron read it in the war room, his expression darkening with each word. Return my legitimate heir immediately or face political and legal consequences. Morella stood frozen, one hand protectively on her rounded belly beneath her green gown with gold embroidery. He wants the baby. Over my dead body. Theron's voice was steel. The legal assault came swift and brutal. Caelthor filed formal claims with the Wolf Council, invoking biological father's rights. Political allies pressured Theron from all sides. Avoid war, return the child. Kingdoms took sides, alliances shifted, threats multiplied. Morella's fear spiraled. What if they force me to give up my baby? What if the law says he has rights? What if I have to go back there? Theron pulled her into his arms, careful of her belly. This child is mine in every way that matters. I'll fight the entire wolf world before I let them take you. He fortified borders, gathered loyal allies, built legal arguments around abandonment, endangerment, attempted harm. Every preparation was made for the worst-case scenario. Month 8 brought intensifying pressure. Caelthor's messengers appeared at the gates weekly, demands growing more threatening. Morella's pregnancy advanced, the baby dropping, her body preparing for birth. Each night she lay awake, hand on her belly, whispering fears. What if he comes? What if he takes our baby? Only Theron's presence kept her grounded. His steady voice, his protective touch, his unwavering certainty. Then the news came that changed everything. Caelthor was travelling north, coming personally to claim his heir. Arrival estimated in days. Morella was in her final weeks of pregnancy. He had his chance to be a father, Theron said, holding her close as she trembled. He chose to demand you kill this child. I chose to love them before they were born. Biology doesn't make a father. Choice does. But as snow began to fall outside, both knew that words wouldn't be enough. Blood would decide. Chapter 8. A Father's Duel. Caelthor arrived the day before Morella's due date, his entourage dark against the white landscape. He demanded entry at the fortress gates, and Morella, despite Theron's protests, insisted on being present. They met in a snowy forest clearing just beyond the walls. Witnesses gathered as word spread. This confrontation would determine everything. Caelthor stood in the background, dark clothing stark against the snow, his posture radiating possessive fury. Morella stood between the two men, heavily pregnant in her green gown and fur cloak, one hand protectively on her belly. And Theron positioned himself in the foreground, his golden hair catching the weak winter light, crimson tunic and blue cloak marking him as a barrier between his family and the threat. "That's my child she's carrying," Caelthor snarled. "My bloodline, my heir. She will return with me, deliver the child, and I'll raise my legitimate heir as befits their station. I'm not yours." Morella's voice rang clear despite her fear. "This baby isn't yours. You demanded I kill them. You called them an abomination, a bastard, a threat." She stepped closer to Theron. "Theron is their father. He chose us when you threw us away. I was pressured by my council. I made a mistake." You made a choice, Mirella said, her voice cutting, and I'm making mine. Wolf law gives biological fathers rights, Kael'thor insisted desperately. Wolf law also says abandonment and endangerment void those rights, Theron countered, his voice deadly calm. The verbal battle escalated, voices rising until Kael'thor's hand moved to his weapon. Then let blood decide. Kael'thor's words silenced the gathering. I challenge you to alpha duel for rights to mother and child, the witnesses murmured. This was ancient law, binding and absolute. Theron's blue eyes never wavered. I accept. I fight for my family. Dawn tomorrow. Wolf combat. To submission or death. Mirella gasped as a contraction rippled through her. Early labor beginning. Terror flooded her. Terror of losing Theron. Terror of being forced back to Kael'thor. Terror for her child caught between two kings. But when she spoke, her voice was fierce. I choose Theron. No matter what the law says, he's my baby's father. She met Kael'thor's eyes across the snowy clearing. You wanted me to kill this baby. He loved them before they were born. Blood doesn't make you a father. Love does. And you never loved either of us. Dawn broke cold and clear. Mirella woke to contractions rippling through her belly. Early labor. Unmistakable. I have to be there, she insisted as healers tried to convince her to stay abed. I have to testify. They supported her to the ancient stone circle where hundreds of witnesses had gathered in the snow. Before the combat could begin, Mirella stepped forward, one hand on her contracting belly. Kael'thor is the biological father. I don't deny that. Her voice carried across the silent crowd. But he demanded I terminate this pregnancy in his throne room. He called my baby an abomination, a bastard, a political threat. He had me thrown out to die in a blizzard. She turned to where Theron stood, love shining through her pain. Theron found us dying. He saved us both. He's attended every milestone, loved this baby from the beginning. He's preparing to be a father. Kael'thor just wants property. Her final words rang with absolute conviction. Theron is my child's father. He's earned it. And if you force me back to Kael'thor, I'll run again. I'll keep running, because I will not let my child be raised by someone who wanted them dead. The shift came simultaneously. Both Alpha Kings transformed, Theron's golden fur gleaming, Kael'thor's dark coat bristling with rage. The combat was brutal. Claws tore flesh, fangs sought throats, blood stained the snow. Kael'thor fought with possessive fury, Theron with desperate love-driven ferocity. Back and forth, neither yielding, both relentless, despite mounting wounds. Then Mirella gasped, her water breaking, active labor beginning. Theron heard. His blue wolf eyes found hers across the arena. Hold on, love. Just hold on. Renewed ferocity surged through him. He wasn't just fighting for her anymore. He was racing against time itself. She'll be mine when you're dead. Kael'thor's snarl was triumphant as his claws raked Theron's side. But Theron had been trained by something stronger than rage, love. Strategic strikes, using Kael'thor's exhaustion and emotion against him, wearing him down until finally, inevitably, the dark wolf fell. Theron's jaws closed around Kael'thor's exposed throat. Submission. Theron of the Northern Reaches is victorious, the elder declared. All biological claims are hereby relinquished. Kael'thor shifted back to human form, defeated. The child is not mine. Theron was already running to Mirella, shifting mid-stride. Her labor had advanced rapidly. The baby was coming now here, no time to reach chambers. I'm here, I'm right here. He held her hand as healers surrounded them, but it was his voice coaching her breathing, his encouragement carrying her through. You're so strong, you're amazing, almost there. Their daughter was born crying and perfect into the snow-dusted dawn. Theron cut the cord with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face as the tiny bundle was placed on Mirella's chest. Our daughter, Mirella whispered, exhausted and radiant. Our family. Theron pressed his forehead to hers, then bent to whisper to the baby, "Hello, little one. I'm your papa. I've been waiting so long to meet you." In the distance, Kylethor watched, alone, defeated, finally understanding what he'd lost. Not a political heir, but a family. He turned and left, never to return. Legal documents were signed. The child bore Theron's name, his legacy, his love. "She's ours," Theron murmured as they were carried inside, wrapped together against the cold. "She was always ours. Biology doesn't matter. Love does. And we have so much love to give her." 5 years later, the northern reaches flourished under the joint rule of King Theron and Queen Morella. She was radiant in deep green ceremonial gowns, her confidence and warmth beloved by all. Silver now threaded through his golden hair, but Theron's protective love had never wavered. 3 children played in the snow outside the palace, their eldest daughter with dark curly hair like her mother, a golden-haired son of 3, and a baby of 1 with features blending both parents perfectly. No distinction was ever made between them. All were chosen, all were loved, all were heirs. "Papa, Mama, tell me the story again," their daughter called, breathless from playing. Morella and Theron exchanged the loving glance of parents who'd told this tale 1,000 times, and would tell it 1,000 more. "Once there was a mama who was very brave," Morella began. "And a papa who found her in the snow," Theron continued, pulling his family close. "And they chose to be a family," they finished together. Their daughter's eyes, warm brown like Morella's, grew thoughtful. "Papa, you chose us." Theron's voice grew thick with emotion. "Every single day, little one. I chose you before you were born, and I choose you every moment since." "And that's the most special kind of love," Morella added softly. "The love we choose." The children accepted this truth naturally, as they always had. It was simply how their family worked. Throughout the wolf kingdoms, their story had become legend. The gentle healer queen who survived the impossible. The golden king who redefined fatherhood. The duel that changed wolf law forever. Now biological fathers had to prove worthiness, not simply claim rights. Other kingdoms began celebrating chosen families, honoring bonds built by love rather than blood. As snow fell softly around them, Theron wrapped his arms around Morella while their children played. Their joined hands showed matching wedding bands, and beyond them, the kingdom prospered in unprecedented peace. "He gave me the greatest gift," Morella whispered, watching their family. "Not just saving my life, but teaching me that family isn't about blood. It's about love, choice, and showing up every single day." Theron kissed her temple. "Some families are given to us by blood, but the best families, they're built by choice, love, and the courage to protect each other no matter what." Their eldest daughter laughed, throwing snow in the air, unaware she'd been born into a story that would change kingdoms. Unaware that the man who'd held her first breath wasn't connected by DNA, but by something far stronger. Love. Choice. And a father who'd fought for her before she'd even taken her first breath. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to remember. Family is what we build, not what we're born into. Like and subscribe for more stories about love that chooses, protects, and never gives up. Because sometimes the bonds we forge are stronger than the ones we inherit.